you want it to, but the price could change. So like, the quicker you make the decision, the more sure the cost is.
Absolutely.
But if you delayed that decision for a few months, this price is no longer guaranteed. The value of steel may have gone up, so the prices may change. So it's the amount of time you have is related to the cost.
Sure.
So it's not as simple as you have a month. You have more than that if you're willing to potentially pay more.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
So it's not a simple.
Yeah, that's fair, yeah.
So what I'm hearing for the two things, go back to the 60-day for the bid to be valid. We'd lose it after that 60 days. Or if we accepted the alternate in that bid, could we then later cut it? We'd be able to do that? Means if we accepted, we say we're going to do the lighting, but it's determined that we don't want that alternate, can we then cut that alternate before it actually, any margin, any work is done for that item? If that makes sense what I'm saying.
You could choose not to purchase the equipment that you're going to purchase directly, and then you could ask for it. You could issue a proposal request that asks the contractor, okay, we're choosing not to do this. How much money are you going to take off your price to not install the electrical?
The
And-
8355 or
And then there would be a process of communication back and forth about what the agreeable value for that is.
So it does give you I guess the risk would be the 8350. If we don't do that project, we don't spend the money on the $72,000 lighting
Because we're purchasing it ourselves.
because we're purchasing that out of scope of the bid. And for the pergolas, I think that would be based on when that we just have to hold to that 60-day mark. The low bidder currently also bid that alternate lower. So there's some savings on that, about $44,000 savings.
Correct. Are there any other questions, commissioners?
I would move to approve the general prime base bid in alternate number 10 and alternate 11. On said bid.
So we have a motion to approve the low base bid with alternate 10 and alternate 11.
Is that an appropriate?
I was just thinking, Commissioner Oderman, considering we are doing these one by one, and whether you do agree on alternates or not, it would probably best if you amended your motion. Let's address the baseline bid first, get a vote on that, and then we proceed accordingly based on the alternates.
Okay, so amended.
And so we need, is this a baseline bid for general, mechanical, and electrical, or so it is for all three of them?
Correct.
The baseline bid.
Oh, so we don't do separate motions for general, mechanical, and electrical, we just do the combined?
Yes, I believe, according to Mr. Zuroff, based on our work study discussion, you are bidding all three, so the baseline bid for all three of those would be appropriate.
So that'd be the 4,319,385 then?
I believe that's the figure, yes.
It would be the general prime, low bid, Two's Construction, the mechanical prime, low bid, Central Mechanical, and the electrical prime, low bid, Denny's Electric. Those three totals.
Would that,
I further amend my motion to include the combined general, mechanical, and electrical.
I don't think we can say combined because that, we have a tab down there. So it would be the low bid general, low bid mechanical, low bid electrical.
so would that include the contingency or not?
So I'll go back to the project. Those are costs that are owner's costs.
So it'd be the 4,113,700.
So it would be the 4,113,700.
Okay. Do you amend it to that again?
Yes.
This is important, so good discussion.
I would second that motion.
I have a motion by Commissioner Oderman to approve low bid general mechanical and electrical to include all, no, we're not including alternates. And the second by Commissioner Frederick. Any further discussion, questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Mr. Oderman, do you have a motion, or does any other commissioner have a motion on alternates?
Mrs. Winkle, should we do each alternate separately, or?
Yes.
Okay, I'll move to approve the low bid on alternate number 10.
We have a motion to approve the low bid on alternate number 10.
I'll second that.
Any discussion, questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
I'll make the same motion on alternate number 11.
We have a motion to approve alternate number 11 by Commissioner Oderman,
Second.
second by Commissioner Frederick. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Are there any other alternate motions?
So splash pad lighting, since we're buying it, we have some time on that one. We wouldn't have to do that today, correct? Because we're buying the equipment.
There was an alternate under electrical for the 8350.
So we have at risk $8,350.
If we wanted to add that one alternate from electrical, so that we essentially risking the 8350 potentially. And that's based on Denny's Electric.
That, we didn't approve that portion though.
We would have to then do alternate splash pad lighting approval. That would be for alternate number 4.
Well, yeah, the 8350 includes the,
That's all we're approving, just the 8350.
right.
We'd have time to consider that as a commission for that 72,000, and that could be
Right, if we wanted to actually buy the equipment.
other funding. But if we don't do that, we may be on, use the term on the hook, but we would be accepting that that's a 8350 install. But if you don't have the items to install, I'm not sure if you'd be held to that. That's probably a legal contract question.
While commissioners are thinking that over, my suggestion would be that we also, that a commissioner would consider the alternate number 3, since it is at no cost to us.
Well, I was just looking at that.
But I thought it's included in the base bid, so do we need to?
I think we should still approve that.
Mr. President, if it's identified on the bid,
Right.
this bid as alternates, I think it would make sense to make a separate motion for that.
That one's an easy one. I'll make that motion.
Commissioner Frederick makes the motion for alternate number 3, the flagpole at 0 cost.
I'll second it.
Second by Commissioner Sobeluk. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Any others?
Well, for discussion purposes, I'll make a motion to approve number 4, the splash pad lighting electrical for 8350, and we can discuss the other part at a different time, I guess.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Frederick on alternate number 4, electrical, for 8350 with a second by Commissioner Walla. Any further discussion?
I guess I would just ask if other commissioners think that the splash pad is something ultimately that we will get the value out of, that we're looking for there. Because, I mean, I guess a couple considerations I would ask us to make is, how often would it be in use? Like, how many months of the year would we actually be able to use the splash pad lighting? Would it be on over, after dark, when pad lighting would be the most valuable, because the lighting would be able to light up the water mostly at night? What's the headache that would create for Chief Dossinger and his staff at the police department with bars being in very near vicinity to that splash pad? And if we're going to have that splash pad and lighting, would that be like moths to a flame?
Zach, can you comment on, the splash pad doesn't have to be on for the lighting, correct?
Actually, that's not true. The lighting produces heat such that the splash pad itself needs to be running for the lighting to run. So you can run the splash pad without the lights, but if you want the lights to run, the water has to be running.
So it couldn't be ran in the winter time, like if there was an event downtown in the evening, just to have lights on the ground. You couldn't run those lights just for beautification.
That's correct, unless the water was also running.
Well, that's, okay. then.
So I guess, and that's why I asked that question, is because, I mean, realistically, you can probably use this thing six months of the year, if that.
That's pushing.
That's pushing it. And would we want to have it on at night? Chief Dossinger, is that a headache you'd want to deal with?
I think time would definitely tell with that, but I think also what type of separation security system you can have in place will all dictate that. Security cameras, warning devices, those are all things that would come to play with this.
Well, and I'm sure they wouldn't just run all night either. It would be a
Timer?
Yeah, there would be
And,
something that
yeah,
shut them off at a certain
yeah.
time so that they're not, at 1:15 when everyone's.
I'm not trying to be a fun hater,
I know
because
it
I
is.
do think it would be a beatification thing for downtown, but,
Well, right now,
Yeah.
it
So
sounds
like
like a
when
fun
we
place.
go to other towns, as a family, we
you
do the
would do
splash
that?
park, but not at 10 PM. I'm not taking my kids there at 10 PM. And because I was looking at pictures online of the lit splash pads and thinking maybe during the day you'd see something, and I couldn't see anything
Yeah.
online on those photos that showed splash pads with lighting during the day. And with our extremely long days in the summer, that's when we're going to be using it. I think of like at First on First, if you're staying later, your kids likely aren't staying. By that point in time, your kids are probably headed home. So, and you probably want that space for people at the concert, not necessarily to run through the splash pad at 10 PM at night. So, this is one that I am leaning away from. I feel like I'm not sure I'm capturing $80,000 of value in this one.
Well, when you can't use it unless the splash pad is running.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, because
That changes the
it does. Because if it could have been used in the winter, just as a
lighting
Yes,
thing,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it'd be fun to light up the snow and stuff.
right.
Yeah.
So then, actually, I'll rescind my motion on that one.
We have,
Thanks for making the motion, though, so we could have discussion about it.
Yeah.
And do we have to make a
being a fun
motion
hater.
either way on each of these alternates, or can we just let them be, or how does this work?
Commissioner Silva, you just simply have to make a motion on those that you decide to move forward with, which you are doing currently.
okay. So we have a rescission of the motion for alternate number 4, the splash pad lighting. Are there any other alternates that?
Mr. President, just for point of clarification, you two have 2 seconds, so you should vote. I presume the motion will die upon the vote, so we should probably proceed accordingly that way. I'm assuming, I didn't hear a rescission of the,
Mr. Friedrich did.
oh,
I rescinded my
Yeah.
okay,
motion.
all right,
Yep.
thank you.
Well, for discussion purposes, I'm going to make another one since this is one that can't be added later, but Number 6, add 4 pergolas, $139,900. I'd make a motion to approve that alternate.
And I would second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion to approve alternate number 6 by Commissioner Frederick with a second by Commissioner Sobeluk. Any further discussion?
I do think there's value on this one. They are doing some fundraising with naming opportunities for the pergolas, so I
And
do
there's
think
just-
there's some value there.
Not tree growth, so you have an all-day
Right.
concert outside or, something.
Yep.
It's nice to have a little bit of shade where you are.
Provides a little cover.
Provides a little cover.
So, any further discussion on alternate number 6? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Are there any other alternates? I think this covers everything on the,
I mean, the wood benches, I would think if we decide to do that, that could be done later as a change order. Those could be added. Pavilion sound system, I would imagine that's something our IT department could probably
Right.
tackle at some point if we needed it. And the gas heaters, I mean, would the stuff be there for the gas heaters? Just heaters wouldn't be there? Would the gas piping be there as part of the base bid?
Yeah, as part of the design, the infrastructure to get power and gas to that location is being provided as part of the base bid. And then this is just the additional piping directly to hook them all up. So it is something that you could do in the future.
Okay, thanks, Zach.
all right, is there anything else on the downtown square bid? That should cover the downtown square. We do have public hearings this evening. The first item up in the public hearing is our 2022 budget. And this will be the first reading of, make sure I get my ordinance right. Ordinance 1725. And this will be handled by Deputy City Administrator Carlson.
Thank you, President Decker and Commissioners. Before you is the ordinance, and after the work session, there was no changes to the ordinance that's being presented to you. So this would be the ordinance that we would need first reading and a public hearing on. And for the public, our total general fund expenditure is $22,451,331. So upon that, I'll answer any questions you may have. And I'm asking for approval of the ordinance number 1725.
Thank you, Mrs. Carlson. Any questions for Mrs. Carlson on 1725? This is a public hearing, so if anyone has any questions about ordinance 1725, this is our 2022 budget. Please come forward, state your name, and ask your question of the city commission or staff. And if you wish, if you're watching online, if the internet's up, you may call in at 701-456-7006.
Hey, Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Oderman.
I think it maybe would be appropriate for us to pull up that PowerPoint that we had with the highlights from the work session today, so that we could share that with the public.
Okay.
Is that
Mr. Maury,
possible?
can you get to that quickly?
And then maybe Mrs. Carlson can just go over those highlights real quickly. Sorry, I kind of dropped that on you, Robbie.
The conference is currently empty. You will hear silence or music on hold when connected.
Yeah, that's exactly.
You want to
Thank you.
run through this quick for them?
Yep,
For the
if you
public?
could dim the lights, please, so they can see it. Okay, for our budget highlights for '22, our general fund is balanced at $22,451,331. This is revenue and expenses, which is 8.19% higher than '21. The city's total fund expenditure, this is all departments, all funds, our budget is 4.85% higher than '21. General fund tax levy is 4.7 million for the general fund, and this is with no city property tax increase for 2022, and the city levy has not changed since 2017. The oil impact revenue subsidy to general fund will be 3,613,225 compared to 4.2 million, which is in '21, which is a 14.43% decrease. In '22, administrative fees from the enterprise funds, which is your water, sewer, storm, treatment plant, supports the general fund, stayed the same at 15%. In the '22 budget, there will be no cost of living increase. Proposing a built-in performance matrix step increase of 2% for full-time employees. Anyone currently at step 18 will not see a performance increase. Our wage study, our new matrix wage study stops at step 18. But we are proposing a health credit benefit change from a 40-year plan to a 2.5% every 5 years to a 20-year plan at 1% every year. In other words, every year that you're here, you receive a 1% health credit on what you need to pay as an employee for your health credit. This is approximately $131,778 increase to the employer side. New positions proposed for general fund is 10 with 1 additional promotion position. This is an increase of wages of $510,340. This is on an annual basis. Of 10 positions, 7 positions are 4 for police and 3 for fire. General fund cash reserve allocation will include $475,374 of public safety equipment. The unassigned cash that Mr. Maury gave for our financials is the unassigned cash. This is where the cash reserve comes for this equipment. Capital projects for '22 is proposed at $11,330,000 out of the oil impact fund. Community betterment projects of $5 million are proposed out of our development impact fund. This is to include $2 million for the career technical school, $1.5 million for the sports complex, and $1.5 million for mausoleum. Proposed 1% sales tax allocation is $6.9 million. Again, $2 million for town square project, $2.5 million for property tax relief, $750,000 for the Stark development, and $300,000 for the airport. Proposed loan out of our future fund investment of $2 million for the town square project. Proposed 0.5% sales tax allocation is $3.5 million, including $1.7 million in property tax relief, and the community center revenue bond payment of $1.2 million. 22 interest revenue earned will be allocated as $639,000 for general capital leases and property tax relief, $100,000 to the city defined benefit liability, $300,000 for public safety radios, $200,000 for maintenance reserve, and $50,000 for downtown streetscape.
Thank you, Mrs. Carlson. Again, this is a hearing. If anyone wishes to address the city commission, please come forward, state your name and your question.
Jeff Fitzik, Dickinson City resident. I'd like to thank Commissioners Soboluk and Mr. Oderman for their good information and insight on the splash pad issue. I'm still wondering if you got your answer, if it's going to shoot icicles out in the winter. But what I'd like to address on the budget is the mausoleum issue that I saw under community benefit betterment projects. has anybody on the commission, was anybody here when the last one was built? Has anybody there on the commission or otherwise talked to any of the people who work in the cemeteries about adding on to a mausoleum? Is there any awareness of that other than just moving ahead with the project? Because I work in the cemeteries, and so I'm kind of curious if you guys have had some input on a proposed project for $1.5 million.
Yeah, Mr. Fisher with.
Yeah,
the-
we
with
had,
the
we
city-
had, yeah.
Yeah, it's, they went through a planning process and, the procurement process on, they've got it planned out already. They've got the design. And, the nice thing about that project is that that's money that we eventually get back. Because we do sell those spots in the mausoleum.
Yep.
Yeah.
I understand you sell them, but, so one of the things I do in the cemetery, and I do it for the city of Dickinson as a private contractor, if you guys are familiar with surface vaults, you've surely seen them if you've driven past the cemeteries. They look like a big concrete slab with a nameplate on the end of it. Some of them are just decorative covers, but the majority of them are exactly what the name surface vault implies. The vault with the casket and remains is directly under that cover, flush with the surface of the ground. Mitchell Olson invented them in the late 1940s. It was a great idea that failed. The idea was you put them in ahead of time, winter comes, you have frozen ground, you pop the cap off, you have your funeral, there's no frozen ground to deal with, there's no snow removal to deal with, everything's fine, except what happens to concrete in the frost zone in North Dakota. It busts up. And once it starts busting up, it lets water into this box, which is like an ice cube tray. And so ice expands in your ice cube tray. It certainly does it there whether there's a casket in there or not, which is why all of those are deteriorating, which is why now the city of Dickinson, because after they knew this problem was there 5 years after they made them, and they continued doing them until Mr. Karski outlawed them in the 90s and took great heat for it. So 50 years of installing these in the city cemeteries. Now I'm being hired at taxpayer expense to lower them down 6 feet where they should have been in the first place. Because when you lay a body on the ground, eventually you're going to have bones. And that's the stark truth. So now you're putting them in a building in North Dakota, above ground. So I was wondering if anybody had thought through some of the consequences and talked to anybody who actually works in the cemeteries
President Decker,
about that.
if I may.
Mr.
Yes, it was, we talk all the time. The cemetery's under the city public works. There is a need and a push for additional mausoleum vaults and a lot of the remains of not just the crypts. I'm trying to think of the wordage, the crypts, but also those that for the urns too. So we're looking at columbariums, we're looking at different things. There's a big push by the local,
Funeral homes?
thank you. It's not there yet. Funeral homes, there's a lot of requests to have more columbariums, a lot of requests to have more crypts. The current columbarium and crypts, we don't have many issues with. So yes, we've dealt with the funeral homes, we've dealt with the cemetery people.
Well, I'm one of the cemetery people and nobody's dealt with
You're
me.
you're not a cemetery employee, whereas.
No, you don't have a cemetery employee anymore who digs graves. You guys forfeited that during the boom. Now it's done privately.
Right,
there is
I
no-
know that because we pay you to
Yeah.
do that. Yes,
No, you don't, actually. The funeral homes pay me.
yes.
I work directly for the funeral homes now, not for the city at all in regards to burials.
To burials, but to.
For the
replace-
reburials, you pay me.
We
yes.
pay you, and for the surface vault work.
That's-
We
yeah,
pay,
that's
that's
the
part of the
reburial.
budget.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is
Oh.
this is another problem that's down the road. And the funeral homes, as I pointed out with the surface vaults, they're the ones who created the surface vaults. Okay? And now they're asking for another thing above ground.
So that-
We have lots of space in western North Dakota. We're not New York City, where space is at a premium for things like burials. Okay? a person could certainly look at acquiring, you already have another cemetery that's been all outlined, plotted out since Karski was here, with a cemetery commission that the public was participant in, which was done away with. So now you don't even have that input.
There has been a request by the community, and that's why we move forward.
Well,
So,
I would like you
for-
guys to consider more than just the funeral homes
We
and,
have.
and the churches on it, who don't deal with the consequences directly. The way that mausoleum was built, and I was here when it was built,
Okay.
okay? That's stacked concrete culverts. That's what the bodies go into, the caskets go into, stacked concrete culverts with a facade around it of granite. If that tornado that hit the south side of town had gone through the north side of town, you'd have pieces as far as that went. No, and you heat that building. You don't heat a cemetery. So I would like you guys to kind of consider that while you have the time to consider it. And I'm not even saying that you don't need to go with it. I'm just saying you should talk to some people outside of the people who want this,
And we,
as opposed to, you know, so. Yeah. That's a valid point. Yeah.
a great place for them to be able to do that, and if they, you know, a lot of times they're they have a challenge getting in, and so when we do that, that is a great benefit that we could provide it, and we are running out of spaces here at this mausoleum, and so it's
Yep.
really nice to know that we have that opportunity to come on in.
Okay, well, that's a valid point. That's fine. So,
Like, the deer has this really good reasons to have, so that is part of the
okay, thank you.
Valuable input, though, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Any questions on ordinance 1725, which is city budget for 2022? If you're watching online, area code 701-456-7006. The public hearing is still going on the 2022 budget. Seeing no one else from the public has any comments, and there is no one online with any comments, I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, you have any further comments for city staff on the 2022 budget, ordinance 1725? Hearing none, I'd look for a motion on the first reading of ordinance 1725.
Move to approve.
I have a motion to approve by Commissioner Sobeluk,
Second.
second by Commissioner Walla. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Our next public hearing is Chapter 39, the wireless communication. This will be ordinance 1726. And this will be presented by Mr. Josephson, I guess it's Mr. Hadley this evening, and City Attorney Winko.
Thank you, Mr. President and the Commission. This is the first reading and public hearing for this ordinance. This deals with small cell communication within the public right-of-way. It's a kind of a new option for the cell companies to provide that service. It's regulated by the FCC, a lot of it. And so we've had a couple of workshops and then also public hearings for the Planning Commission. No general public input on it. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of this, and staff would recommend approval of it as well. It does allow the installations within our public right-of-way, which right now we don't currently allow.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hadley. Mrs. Winko, any additional comments?
Mr. President, Commissioners, I would just add that there is a major push for this. We get requests all the time from the North Dakota Department of Transportation to sign agreements with regard to these facilities. We are in the technology era, so we're going to see more of these, and I think it's very important that the city has something on the books that we're able to regulate these to some degree. And I would also stand for that approval as well.
All right, thank you. This is a public hearing, so I will open up the public hearing. Anyone has any concerns, comments on Chapter 39 Amendment, Ordinance 1726, to the wireless communications? Please come forward, state your name, let us know your concerns or have any comments. If you're watching online, 701-456-7006. Anyone have any comments? Any comments or concerns on 1726? Please come forward, state your name. I'll close the public hearing, seeing there are no questions or concerns on ordinance 1726. This is a Chapter 39 amendment to our wireless communication. And I would look, are there any questions or comments, commissioners? Now I'd look for a motion.
I'll move to approve ordinance 1726, first reading.
We have a motion to approve the first reading of 1726 by Commissioner Walla.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Oderman. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. We have another public hearing, Chapter 39 Amendment to our adult entertainment centers. This will be ordinance 1727, and this will be presented by, again, Mr. Hadley and City Attorney Wenko.
Thank you, Mr. President and Commission. This is an amendment to clean up our existing code. Where you can see there's amendments to Chapter 3 and Chapter 39. This particular ordinance deals with Chapter 39's amendment, and what it does is any adult entertainment as defined would be allowed in the limited industrial and industrial zones with a special use permit granted by the Planning Commission and yourselves. Had a number of workshops on those, and the Planning Commission had a public hearing on it. There was no opposition to it, and staff would recommend approval as written.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley. Mrs. Wenko?
No, Mr. President, I think this one's pretty straightforward.
All right, thank you.
This replaces and cleans up the existing one that we already had, correct?
Commissioner Oderman, so the Chapter 39 amendments that we're discussing will go hand in hand with the Chapter 3 as we get later down the list.
Yeah.
But this one specifically to allow it in those particular zoning districts. Currently, it's prohibited pursuant to what's currently in the code, so we just need to clean it up, make that allowable in those districts. So that's the only portion of this that's changing. So in reality, it's a pretty minor change. We're just allowing those in those zoning districts.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for city staff? If not, this is a public hearing. If anyone has any concerns, please come forward, state your name. This is the first reading of ordinance 1727, and it is a Chapter 39 amendment to our code. Anyone have any concerns? Comments or questions? If you're watching online, 701-456-7006. Anyone have any concerns? Comments or questions? Again, if you have any concerns, please come forward, state your name. Seeing no one has any concerns on ordinance 1727, commissioners, do you have any questions for city staff, comments? Hearing none, I'd look for a motion on 1727.
Mr. President, I make a motion for first reading of ordinance 1727.
We have a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance 1727 27 by Commissioner Frederick,
Second.
second by Commissioner Walla. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. The next item up is for public hearing of Chapter 39 Amendment definitions. And this will be ordinance 1728. Mr. Hadley.
Thank you, Mr. President and Commission. This ordinance actually deals with all the definitions that correspond to the last two ordinances that you have just acted upon. So we just wanted to clean it up and basically have it in one place, so you have definitions that are appropriate for both of those previous ordinances.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hadley. Any questions for Mr. Hadley on this ordinance? Again, this is a Chapter 39 amendment, definitions. This is a public hearing. So if anyone from the public wishes to come forward, has any questions about the Chapter 39 amendment definitions, please come forward, state your name. Let the commission know your concerns or questions on the definitions. If you're watching online, 701-456-7006. Again, anyone from the public has any questions or concerns on this amendment? If you have any questions on ordinance 1728, please come forward. Seeing no one has any questions or concerns on ordinance 1728, Commission, do you have any questions for city staff? Not, I'd look for a motion on ordinance 1728.
So moved.
We have a motion to approve ordinance 1728, first reading.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Oderman. The motion to approve is by Commissioner Sobeluk. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Our last public hearing of the evening is Chapter 3 Amendment to our Code of Adult Entertainment. This will be ordinance 1729. Again, Mr. Hadley and City Attorney Winko.
Thank you, Mr. President and Commission. This Chapter 3 amendment, I'll leave if there's any questions to the City Attorney, Ms. Winko. It was heard concurrently and discussed concurrently in our workshops, just so it made sense. With that, staff would recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley.
Mr. President, Commissioners, just to give you some context of what you're looking at. As we worked through Chapter 39, we knew that there were going to be some changes that we need to make to Chapter 3 so that they run consistently together. It is, if you look at the ordinance in front of you, it's going to look like we got rid of the whole thing. I thought it was much easier to start fresh and incorporate some of the existing code provisions that the city already had, as well as adopt some other conditions or provisions from other communities. And you'll also see that our previous code kind of lumped everything together, and so I thought it was much easier to follow by breaking it out and making it much easier to read. We don't want to have someone spend an hour trying to find a code provision when we can break it down and make it more accessible and easier to read. So you're going to see a little bit of those things kind of divvied out in the ordinance. And then as well, just so that the commission is aware, there was a license process previously adopted as a part of the prior code provision. We still have that as a requirement. The thought process is that the applicant does have to submit the necessary paperwork. We want to make sure that we are monitoring and regulating these facilities, and these provisions will allow us to do that. And I would stand for any questions if anyone has any.
And Ms. Winko, just to add into that, that would be after a special use permit is granted by the planning commission and the board.
Correct. Just to clarify in case there's any question, so what will happen is, we wanted it to be a two-step process. We wanted oversight with regard to the regulations, so it will come in front of planning and zoning, it will go through the special use permit process, then it will come to this city commission for ultimate approval of a license. So you get the application, and then once that application, or the permit application is approved, then the city will look at that on a renewal basis every year, just to make sure that we're monitoring everything is in compliance. And the only thing that I will note is that the ordinance that you have in front of you does not indicate the annual renewal license fee. And visiting with City Administrator Winningham, he would like to keep that at the set $2,000 fee. So that would be the only modification based on what is not currently in your packet. So if you do decide to pass that motion, it would be with that addition as well, that fee be set as it currently is now.
All right, thank you. Any questions before we go to the public hearing?
Yes, so I am thinking there maybe isn't a wrong attachment here. Because when we just voted on 39, I just opened up the same thing on 3. And so both the public hearing, Chapter 39 amendments on Adult Entertainment Center and Chapter 3 amendments, they're both the same attachment. And so I didn't realize they should be two different ones until now that I'm looking at the same one at this one. And so I'm wondering if we voted on the wrong one a couple minutes ago.
That one would have been the Adult Entertainment Center 39. This one is, you're specifically looking at this one is, the top of the heading, Commissioner Sobeluk should read an ordinance amending and reenacting Chapter 3 of the City Code of the City of Dickinson.
Should be this one.
Yes.
And then if you go back on the OneNote, if you go to the one that says Chapter 39, it's the same document. So I apologize, I only printed one because they were the same, and I realized there's no 39 in this. And
I think we may have just received the wrong.
Yeah, Commissioner Sobel, good catch. That may be an attachment.
I think it's just the attachments were sent wrong to us.
It should have been the 39 amendment, which was.
Because there is the Chapter 39 underneath Chapter 39 definitions. But those are all definitions. There isn't anything to do specifically with the adult entertainment other than the definitions.
It's looking like it's an attachment error in OneNote. And I can certainly email the commissioners the correct ordinance for 39 that we just discussed. That one essentially is just, again, changing the zoning designations for the allowance of that, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Okay, and I have no questions on Chapter 3.
Thank you.
Again, this is a public hearing. This is ordinance 1729. If you have any comments or questions, please come forward, state your name. This is a Chapter 3 amendment to our city code pertaining to adult entertainment. Anyone from the public, please state your name. Let the city commission hear your concerns. If you're watching online, 701-456-7006. Anyone from the public with any concerns on ordinance 1729? Any concerns on ordinance 1729 from the general public? This is a public hearing. Seeing no one has any comments or concerns on ordinance 1729, I'll close the public hearing. This is the first reading of 1729, so I'd look, if there are no more questions or comments from the commissioners, I'd look for a motion.
Mr. President, I move to approve first reading of 1729.
We have a motion to approve the first reading of 1729 by Commissioner Frederick.
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Sobeluk. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. At this point, we'll go to the public comments not on the agenda. If you have any concerns, comments that were not on the agenda, any items that weren't on the agenda this evening, please come forward, state your name, let the commission know your concerns or comments on items not on the agenda. If you're watching online, 701-456-7006. You may call in and discuss anything that was not on the agenda this evening.
Good evening.
What's that?
My name is Teresa Blackwood, and this item was not on the agenda, but I know that it's come before the commission in the past. I'm here regarding a property that belongs to Justin Dukart, and I'd like to know the status of what's going on with the property. I talked to Blaine Dukart a couple of days ago and have been told that he had a certain amount of time to either accept an offer by a person who gave him an offer on his property, or the property was going to be basically put into the condemnation process. And it's my understanding, after contacting the person who had given him an offer, that the offer was not accepted. And so the property is now supposed to be coming before you folks, and then will be trashed.
I'm not aware of
I'd
it,
like to
but
know
Ms.
what
Ms.
the-
Blackwood, but I think our city attorney is.
Ms. Blackwood, I can answer that question for you and give you an update.
That would be great.
Yes. Mr. Dukart has also been in communication with my office with regard to the property issues. We were waiting to hear whether that individual is going to be purchasing that particular property. I'm hearing now that that's probably not a likelihood. So what will happen is the city has to move forward. There will be a hearing with the city commission. Evidence will be presented, and then at that point we will determine if there's enough to move forward with the full condemnation of the property. So there's a legal process that we have to go through with that. If we were to get an order for that, then the city takes possession and obviously can determine at that time what remedies the city wants to take with regard to the structure. Can be cleanup, can be tear down. It's too premature to say one way or the other right now, but those are options on the table in the event that we are successful with the condemnation. So that will be forthcoming.
Okay, it's also my understanding that he's not to be on the property because there's supposed to be nobody on the property at all. That's my understanding of what's going on. Is that correct?
There has been the municipal court judge has issued previous orders to have no trespass orders. I do know that we've had Mr. Dukart in court on several occasions for violation of those orders. I believe there's still a standing order for the no trespass.
Well, he needs his butt hauled back into court again.
Well, I do believe he has been there recently and at other places, so it's very likely. Obviously, if somebody is cited on the property, the Dickinson Police Department would go over and take care of it accordingly.
He doesn't seem to be too terrified of you guys, as I'm sure you're aware. He was in the garage with his mom's car on Saturday, in the middle garage. He was in there again with some of his friends with the van. I live right across the street, and so I have been living there for 12 years now, and so I've seen what's gone on there for the last 12 years. And he seems to just be flagrant of any kind of law and thinks it doesn't apply to him. And I just don't want to see this continue to happen again. I know that he didn't accept the offer that was given to him by one of the contractors here in town, and so now I think he thinks he can just go ahead and do whatever he wants to. And what I'm afraid is going to happen is that the city's going to take another 30 days or 45 days or 60 days to do whatever they need to do to have this continue to go on forever. So I'm really hoping that you do have some teeth to sink in now, that this process gets done.
Sure.
And that he will stay off the property along with his parents and the rest of his kindred spirits that hang around there all the time.
Sure.
To keep him off the property.
I completely understand. Of course, if you are on the property and you're observing someone in the residence, please certainly call it in. I can tell you that we are in the process of moving forward. So it will be forthcoming. We obviously want to work with property owners as much as we can, but we understand that there's a time and a place where that's just simply not realistic anymore. And my understanding in talking with Mr. Dukart is I think we're there. So I can assure you that we are looking at it, we are moving forward with it unless something drastically changes and the property gets cleaned up, which I highly doubt, but again, we are moving forward and that I can assure you of.
Well, I know he doesn't have any money, so he's not going to be able to do anything with the property. There's no way he's going to be able to make a difference. It is cleaned up a lot better than it was, but that doesn't mean that he's brought it into compliance, that he's got any capability to bring it into compliance. He won't stay off the property because he doesn't think he has to. He comes in, as you all know, all hours of the day and night and does whatever he wants to. And I haven't been before the commission, but Nicole has several times. We have written letters. We have talked to the police. We talk to the police when they come and do their rounds, which they are there all the time. And they've been wonderful about coming and doing what they can. But time's up. I mean, time is up.
Sure.
And we really need your help to push this forward because he won't do anything unless you push it forward. So I'm really hopeful that you can do that.
Sure, and I will applaud Mr. Dukart has been very diligent about keeping us up to speed and with the property, and we have had several communications within the last several weeks about the status of the property, so I can assure you it will move forward, and ultimately it's going to be this decision by this commission to decide whether they're going to approve the condemnation, but we will get there. So we will have to go through the motions. It will run through the legal process. You'll have an opportunity to be present at the public hearing when we discuss the issue and voice your concerns again.
Okay, I hope so. And thank you all very much for what you've done. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public have any? Anyone from the public?
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Nicole Wald, and I live at 215 3rd Avenue Southwest. I live next to Justin Dukart. I'm just going to read what I wrote up. Some of the stuff's already been answered, but I guess I'm a little confused because, and first I want to thank Blaine Dukart because I have talked to 3 people in the last 7 years that I've lived here regarding this property, and he has been the best one to get back to me in a timely manner, and very nice. Also, the police department. I guess my question is, I was told too that, first of all, when it got posted on June 8th, I was told that he had 30 days from that date, okay? And I was also told that he has no more options with the city. You're done with him. He doesn't get any more options. And so my question is, if that's the case, then why was somebody else showing the property yesterday afternoon? And I already talked to Blaine about this. It was not the same person that has the contract before. But anyway, I'm going to read you my little letter here. It will be 7 years in November that I have lived next to this property. However, this mess has been going on way before these 7 years. On June 18th, 2019, I spoke at the city meeting regarding the disaster mess at this property, and I was the second person to do that. It will be a year at the end of October 2021 since this property was cleaned up, and it was sometime after that it started getting shown by prospective buyers. On June 8th, 2021, his property was posted by the city declaring it unsafe. I talked to Blaine on June 9th regarding what this meant. On July 14th, I spoke to Blaine by email regarding clarification on the condemnation. He told me that the end of August would be a better time frame for approximate deadlines, and then it moves forward to the city attorney. So today, my neighbor and I would like clarification on the process with the city attorney. So why we're frustrated is because we keep getting told, oh, 30 days, 30 days. Well, you can clearly see that this individual gets many opportunities, and he never follows through. His 30 days are up a long time ago. They were probably up 10 years ago when it all started. And right now, with all the stuff going on about people a little upset about windmills coming in, well, you know what? I'd like to look a mile away and look at a windmill than look what I've had to look at for the last 7 years. This has been going on for 10 plus years, okay? Drugs, pornography. One time when I talked to somebody, which was Leonard, he told me that, well, we like to work with people, Nicole. I said, yeah, so do I. I said, but you know what? Sometimes things come to an end and his time is up. Well, his time was up a long time ago. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any? My mic seems to be dead too. Anyone else have any concerns? Anyone else from the public have any concerns? Seeing no one else from the public has any concerns not on the agenda this evening, I'll close the public comment section. And we'll go back to our normal. I'm trying to find out where we left off here.
Would be a public safety.
HR.
Oh,
right?
HR, yeah, you're right.
HR.
Sorry.
This is Dominic patiently waiting.
Thank you, President Decker, Commissioners. Top of the hiring journal, we have the utilities manager. This position's been on hold for some time. Directors Duroff and myself are actually working on the job description right now, and possibly we'll be having that position open soon and start looking for a replacement. Water reclamation facility has been a position, the operator position's been a difficult one for us to fill. We did make one hire, and we still have one position open, and I believe interviews are this week for that position. We've also lost our senior water reclamation facility operator out at the plant, so we have that position open internally until tomorrow. So interviews will be soon on that as well. Solid waste recycling operator, we did have one declined offer and then reopened it and did fill it with another individual. Communication specialist, as we've been telling you recently, has been very difficult for us. We've got 2 openings, then 3 openings, and then 2 openings, so it's been a real tough one. We do have the position open and are trying to get applicants for the position right now. Corporal police officer, we did have an opening there internally with the promotions that happened with our lieutenants. So it kind of trickled down, and Casey Broston was promoted to corporal police officer. We have 2 police officer positions at this time that are open, and we're doing interviews. We had several in the background. One is still pending. We had 2 of them that did not make it through the background. One is pending, and we do have the positions open. They're doing interviews this week for more police officer positions. Recently had an animal control position open up, and that is open, and we are taking applications on that position. And then the seasonal tree data collection position is a seasonal position that we had open last year, and we're waiting for the grant. We have the position open, and they are in the background phase at this point. That's all the positions that I have to report. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mrs. Nominick. Any questions for Mrs. Nominick on the HR report for this month? Now we'll move on to police department. We have a monthly report. Chief Dossinger.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the commission. I'm before you with the August monthly report of the Dickinson Police Department. For the month of August, the Dickinson Police Department responded to 2,394 calls for service. We were slightly down from last month. With month of July, we responded to 2,720 calls for service. The most prominent calls for service was suspicious persons or vehicles. We responded to 122 calls of those, 114 speak with an officer calls, 71 welfare checks, and 65 paper service or warrant services. Parking complaints and thefts and frauds were tied with 44 calls for service. Our top 5 cited traffic violations include speeding with 28, driving without insurance 23. We had 10 failure to register motor vehicle, 6 red light violations, and care required in driving without insurance, the second offense, were tied with 5. We had a total of 53 accidents within city limits. 2 were injury related, 21 of those were hit and runs, and 30 property accidents. There were a total of 446 traffic stops conducted in the month of August, 99 citations issued, and 279 warnings issued. Warrants, we had 52 warrant arrests. The second highest was drug-related arrests with 18, and 15 criminal trespassing arrests. Behavioral health calls we remain very active with behavioral health calls. We responded to 95 in the month of August. 71 of those were welfare checks, 8 mental health calls, 8 intoxicated subject calls on our streets, and we responded to 8 suicide-related threats. Training, we concentrated a lot on training in our SRO program. We have a new SRO program, Officer Jenny Ray in the middle school. She went to an SRO basic in the month of August. We also had a school resource officer attend basic negotiations for 40 hours, and a school resource officer advanced training for 40 hours for Sergeant Brandon Stocking. Our criminal investigative division came into the month of August with 52 open cases. They picked up 35 additional cases for the month. They did presentations to the Trinity School focusing on internet safety, reasonable suspicion, and narcotics. They also assisted Patrol Division with our back to school kickoff, in which we put a uniformed officer in front of every school within our city for the first day of class. They also conducted Ellis presentations to Dickens Public School staff. They did have 4 call-outs, 1 for a sex offense. They did have 2 death calls which they responded to, and 1 suspicious person call that they responded to. Our SRO program responded to 11 calls in the Dickinson Public Middle School, Grove School, 7 at the Dickinson High School, and 2 at the Alternative School. Our dispatch center answered 939 emergency 911 calls, 5,303 non-emergency calls, and 1,334 outbound calls for the month of August. Our records department did fingerprinting, 65 sets for the month. They did register 35 sex offenders. They did present training to 2 shifts with our NIBRS training, and a record supervisor attended an online uniform crime reporting conference. Our animal shelter responded to 165 calls in the Animal Control Division. They did impound a total of 88 animals, 57 dogs, and 32 cats. 31 of the dogs were returned to the owner, 5 cats were returned to the owner. So the animals remaining at the shelter after the month include 4 dogs, 2 cats, for a total of 6 animals. The most prominent animal call for service was animals running at large with 89 for the month. Just kind of officer recognition, we did have 5 police department officers that had competed in place in the top 20 of the qualified scorers for the 2021 Governor's 20 pistol shooting competition held at the North Dakota Peace Officers Association convention. Those officers were Kylan Clauser, who finished number 3, Mike Hansen, who finished number 6, Justin Frederick, number 7, Bailey Tullius, number 9, and Casey Broston at number 19. As HR Shelley Nominick had mentioned, we did have 2 promotions for the month of August. Casey Brosnan was promoted to corporal, and Mike Hansen was promoted to sergeant. Outlining some of the community events for August, our main community event for the month was our National Night Out, which was held on Tuesday, August 3rd at the Rec Center. This is widely attended. The Dickens Fire Department also participated in that event. It was a very well attended community event. The other community event, we did have Walmart donate a deep freeze to our program to help us with our Popsicle program, which provides police officers the opportunity to hand out Freezy Pops to our kids and community. That was kind of a quick synopsis, but are there any questions?
Thank you, Chief Dossinger. Any questions for Chief Dossinger on his monthly report?
How much does it cost to install that deep freeze in one of the cruisers?
Big battery.
And why aren't they on my block? Thank you. We will move on to engineering. We have a task order with KLJ for 2020, our 2022 mill and overlay, our special improvement district. Interim city and engineer Marshak.
President Decker, Commissioners, before you is a task order 2104-01576 with KLJ Engineering for the 2022 Mill and Overlay Project. This agreement's for professional services consisting of preliminary engineering, design, bidding, and construction administration associated with the project. The intent is to have the project follow a similar process as the last 2 years, which includes a presentation to Commission on potential areas to include based on need, future work cited for the areas, and our budget. Additionally, we intend to create the Special Improvement District for assessments pertaining to needed concrete work following similar guidelines as the last 2 mill and overlay projects. The task order is to be billed at an hourly rate, which is not to exceed $175,000. This is a conservative amount based on last year's budget number. City engineering staff recommends approval of the 2022 mill and overlay project. Do you have any questions for me on this item? Be happy to answer anything.
Thank you, Mrs. Marshak. Any questions for Mrs. Marshak or city staff on this task order? Any questions? Not, I'd look for a motion on this task order.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Oderman,
Second.
second by Commissioner Frederick. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla? Mr. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next item up is Public Works. We have a Highlands Engineering task order for Westridge number 1 addition, road reconstruction. This is City Project 202112. Mr. Zuroff.
Thank you, President Decker and Commission. This task order is for to provide design, bidding, and construction engineering services for the street improvements outlined in the preliminary engineering report, which is in your packet. This includes 40th and 44th Avenue West in that area just north of Westridge Drive. Public Works Street Division staff are currently adjusting the protruding manhole sections and temporary filling voids in preparation of the reconstruction with the reinforced concrete pavement plan for next year. Public Works staff recommends approval. I'll answer any questions as needed.
Thank you, Mr. Zuroff. Any questions for Mr. Zuroff on this task order?
We have any rough idea what it's going to cost?
Yes, in the packet, if looking at the reinforced concrete, we are, I think, right at 615,000 is our estimate to do reinforced concrete on 40th and 44th.
So we would mill that all up or what?
Pardon me?
So then mill the whole road up and, is that my
The-
understanding?
Yeah, there was 3 or 4 different options that we're still discussing. Some is, one of them was mill and overlay the settled areas with foam injection. One was to recompact the subgrade and reconstruct the roadway. One of the difficulties with reconstructing or recompacting the subgrade, I believe, and Andrew Schrank with Highlands is here, is the depth. The cost of digging, a long ways down versus getting a good base and putting a reinforced concrete on top is very similar. So right now we're looking at using the reinforced concrete instead of having to recompact all the way up. If that should hold in that area. And so right now the option that we're looking at is a reinforced concrete. That way, too, if there's future small settlement, we're hoping that that'll still float and not have an issue.
Any other questions for Mr. Zuroff?
And the cause of all this is poor compaction, or when it was originally done?
Yes, and maybe I'll ask Andrew, because we did that, Mr. Schrank, because we did a preliminary report study in that area, and he's got a bunch more numbers that I can't remember, so.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Zuroff. Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering. So we had done an investigation on this site. I don't know that we can state the exact cause. What our investigation consisted of is coring the pavement and running what we call DCP tests on the subgrade. What that does is it determines the bearing capacity of these soils. So those tests can provide an indication of compaction. It doesn't say for sure that that was the issue, but what we did find is we ran these tests up to a depth of 6 feet at the most, and there were some very low bearing values, which could be indicative of poor compaction. One thing that was interesting, we kind of noticed the surface seemed to have fairly good compaction, and we'd notice it would decrease somewhat incrementally to a depth of about 3 feet. We'd see a good compaction again, or a little better compaction, and again it'd start to decrease, which we tend to believe might have been lifts that were over the 6-inch thickness that's recommended. Perhaps there was lifts of 3 feet being put in, compacting to pass your density test. Again, speculation, but those were the types of things we noticed in the DCP testing.
All right. It's unfortunate that we have to rebuild roads that aren't that old.
It definitely is. I would concur with that.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Schrank.
you.
Any other questions? Now I'd look for a motion.
I'll move to approve.
I have a motion to approve by Commissioner Soboluk,
Second.
second by Commissioner Oderman. Any further questions or comments on task order 210235-02? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Soboluk?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Next item up is planning. Hopefully everyone, my tablet did update with the update. Mr. Hadley. This would be resolution 28-2021, if I'm correct.
That's correct, Mr. President and Commission. This is a final resolution for the replat of Riverfront Estates, which creates Riverfront Estates 3rd Edition. It's a 16-lot residential subdivision. It was just heard last week by the Planning Commission. They recommended approval, and the staff would recommend approval as well.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley. Any questions for Mr. Hadley on this resolution?
I'm just going to add one comment to this. On the top of your resolution, it should read the Riverfront Estates 3rd Edition That's what we'll change it to when you approve this resolution. It's correct in the rest of the body, the very first, it's the second line.
The title and the,
A resolution approving final plat and titled, then it should say the Riverfront Estates Third Edition.
yeah, there's a couple of them in the, two of them that need to be amended.
And we'll change all that. That's just, I just want to clarify that it will be Riverfront Estates Third Edition.
All right, thank you, Mr. Winningham. Any other questions or comments on this resolution? If not, I look for a motion.
Second.
We have a motion to approve Resolution 28.
Yes.
That, yes, Resolution 28-2021.
Second.
So we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Walla, second by Commissioner Oderman. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, we'll vote. Ms. Walla. Mr. Oderman.
Aye.
Mr. Frederick.
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
That should be it for agenda items. Down to item 10, Commissioners. Do you have any items that weren't on the agenda this evening that you'd wish to discuss?
Mr. Zuroff or Mr. Winningham, update on City Hall project?
Yeah, I'd probably do a poor job at it, so I'll let Mr. Zuroff. If you don't do well, I'll clean it up.
No, I would appreciate any help with that, but
No, you just had a meeting on
Yeah.
Tuesday, so, or earlier today, so I think.
we did have
Mr. Zuroff-
we did have a meeting earlier today. Progress is going well on it. The upstairs casing is done. They're just waiting on windows. There's another office upstairs that there's some ceiling tile that needs to be done, some more fire sprinkling system that needs to be finished upstairs, but mostly in the commission room. All of the sheetrocking, or the sheetrocking is getting done. Most of it is done in the entryway where the different windows will be for the, like, utility billing, engineering, assessing, and court. The painting is done in most of those rooms, and the carpet is being laid. The commission room, they asked to finish the sprinkler system. They're finishing sheetrocking, which is really kind of tying it together now in the commission room. There's still a lot of work. The commission room is probably the area that'll be done the latest. Upstairs, I think we're going to try to get windows in and occupy probably in a couple weeks on for some of the offices upstairs to get that done. Some of the molding and the doors are still out, as far as the contractor hasn't received them yet. The wood doors in the commission room are going to probably be the longest lead time. We're still waiting on those. The ceiling for the commission room did arrive, and some other things have arrived, but it's looking good. Once the sheetrock is done in the entryway and the tiling gets done, that'll really make it look good, you know, as you enter that area. So it's coming together. Most of the mechanical is finishing up. All the big steel work downstairs is pretty much done. Waiting on some more generator and a couple other things yet for the project. But it's coming together. Some of the material lead time has really been stretched out, especially some of the wood doors and some of the aluminum frames.
Thanks, Mr. Zuroff.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Zuroff. That, well done. Good.
Please add on to that.
And Commissioner Frederick, internally to the city, we had a planning time for 15 October. That was also some of the timeline for the completion of the upstairs. It was really for the majority, if you remember back in the bids, the majority of the work to be completed on the inside by 15 October. That slipped in the target timeline based on what Mr. Zuroff talked about with some of the materials. But we're close on the city staff. It's internally, there's some operational considerations that we still haven't got worked out. We're essentially having weekly meetings to look at movement windows to get staff over. So there may be a period of time where we have split base. We'll have some staff over in that building. IT will be first, and then we've kind of worked through IT moving sections of the departments. But we want to ensure we notify the public if there's going to be any disruptions of their entry points, meaning those that come to utility and those that want to submit applications. So that's all still working, and it was really based on whether we got the green light or occupancy, and that'll have to be internal to the city also, if our building official can go over and make sure safety of use is correct. Because we have, and some of this is detailed, but essentially that entire building, the 3 buildings are all one on the fire suppression system. So once that's approved and once we have safe to move, then we'll start on the first week of October and start putting staff that doesn't generally work with the public in the building upstairs. And then we'll come up with a briefing to the commission that talks about our operations plans once we actually close out this building. And that is looking like December for the commission, and that leads to me having to go in and talk to American Bank and also renegotiate our current lease. I don't project them to evict us, but I want to make sure that our lease is still ongoing. Subject to your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions, comments, anything that wasn't on the agenda you wish to bring up, Commission? I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
Second?
We are adjourned.
Yeah, I was the one who pulled us all up.